going, guys? Today I'm back. It's been a while since I've posted a video up on YouTube. The mini bike project is still ongoing, as well as the senior project. So what better way to complete both of those to start a fresh new project? And that's what we have up here on the workbench today. A friend of mine who owns multiple seniors, unfortunately his steering wheel got busted up. You can see it right there on the right, and asked me to take a look at it and see if we can get it back together. So that's what we're going to be working on today, or at least starting today. And it does have to be completed in a reasonable amount of time. So I will have to be picking at this probably fairly regularly in order to get it done in the next couple weeks, hopefully. The wheel on the left is my original wheel for my senior. The wheel on the right is the wheel that we need to repair. So let's take a look at my wheel. It's a standard Scheller wheel. It does have this little, I guess, triangular diamond pattern in the center. The hole is tapered, and it does have a 3/16 keyway in it because the senior steering shaft is actually tapered with a Woodruff key in it. So, and that's what we have here. And obviously let's see if we can get the name. It does, will this focus for us? Yes, it will. There it is. It's a Scheller. Come on. Let's focus for us one more time, please. I guess not. So it is a Scheller wheel, as well as this one, which was the wheel that they used on seniors as well as Jeeps of the day, seeing that they pretty much took the steering boxes out of those Jeeps. But as you can tell, this one here was a little bit cracked up when they tried to get the wheel off the steering shaft, and which is a very common problem for seniors because water gets down in the shaft between the wheel and the shaft and basically, fuse rusts it into place. In this bag right here are the little pieces to the wheel. I was told that they're all there, but we will have to figure out how to put this jigsaw puzzle back together. Did I say jigsaw? That's some old school right there. So I have a lot of little bits and pieces, and I'm going to have to sit here and try to figure out where they all go before I go any further. Namely, there's like this piece, which was pretty simple. That one clearly goes right there. So that's that. Now the rest of these pieces, I have no idea. I'm going to have to sit here for a few minutes and kind of piece it all back together. I'll take a couple pictures so I know where they go, and then we'll get to the next step. With all the little pieces put into place, it did take me about 20 minutes to figure it all out, but you can see we got some serious issues here. We got chunks missing everywhere. There's this crack. Obviously somebody had took a torch to it to get it off, so it's burnt. And especially right here, this is nothing. But if we flip over the back, we have even bigger issues. Let me see if I could do this without it completely crumbling in my hand. You can see we got a big piece missing out of the wheel. I'm going to have to think about that, how I'm going to fill that in, or what is the best way to do it. But in general, this is going to be a pretty intensive repair on this wheel. First off, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some pictures of this so that way I can kind of keep in mind where all these pieces go. The next thing is these center pieces. I had to actually tap them into place with a little fine soft hammer just to get them to snap into the bars that were welded to this, because they actually form fitted over that. So I'm going to have to alleviate that, because I can't, when I mix up the epoxy eventually to glue all this back together, I'm not going to have enough time to sit there and hammer on it and all this other stuff. I need to get it to fit snug and stay in place, just not snap into place like it is right now. The other thing too is I'm going to have to make some relief cuts here and there, especially maybe like in this area, so that way I could flow epoxy and filler into that area, so that way when I go to sand it, it's going to be real nice and smooth, because ultimately this wheel will have to be primer, filler, and then painted black again. I think the first thing we're going to do now is we're going to take it down to the tub sink, spray it all down with a good degreaser, make sure everything's about as squeaky clean as I can. The center of the hub here. I'm just going to sand that down with a die grinder, with a light sanding wheel, just to make it nice and smooth. I'll make sure it's straight for the most part. And then the next thing we're going to do is then we're going to start working on making some relief filings or relief cuts in this. So that way I can get the 3 center section pieces into place fairly easy. So after hitting the top of the hub with a die grinder and a sanding wheel, just really carefully, and then following it up with a cookie wheel, I was able to remove all of the grind marks on the hub, so that way it's nice and smooth. Also took a wire wheel on the die grinder and just wire wheeled the hubs, the whole hub area down, as well as just took some 220 sandpaper and sanded it down, so that way it is fairly clean. One thing I'm going to have to do is I'm definitely going to have to put like some sort of chemical on it to neutralize the rust that's still in the metal. That has to be done because you can't put the epoxy on rusty metal. So the next thing I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and put some rust remover or rust neutralizer on the hub and part of the spokes. I'm not going to try to soak the plastic because I don't want it to lift the plastic any more than it is, but definitely just going to give it a good coat, try to neutralize that rust, and then we'll get into fitting the broken pieces. With the hub and the spoke areas completely cleaned, I basically, put the navel jelly rust remover on, let it sit, washed it off just by like the directions. It basically took about 90% of all the rust off, hit it with a little bit more sandpaper and a Scotch-Brite pad, wiped everything down, sprayed it down with brake cleaner, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit it with just the metal piece here with a little bit of etching primer, very, very light coat of etching primer, just to make sure that this bare metal is covered before we start doing the epoxy. With everything all primed up, I'm just going to let this sit overnight and dry, so that way I know the primer is really bitten in before I start to mess around with it. Because the next step I'm going to do is I'm going to start fitting these pieces back on the hub, but I got to kind of like hog out or lightly sand or file these areas right here where the metal wire or the metal rod goes in. These guys right there, and the reason for that is this thing, these big pieces kind of snap on pretty hard. I actually have to use a small soft hammer to get them into place. It's also causing it to chip a couple more times too, and I really don't want that to happen. I want to keep these pieces as big as possible. So I'm going to let that primer dry, and then tomorrow I'm going to start trying to fit those little pieces into place. With the primer dried really good, what we're going to do is I'm going to start to epoxy these pieces into place. This one actually goes right there, and that's going to be the first piece that I glue in. So let me go ahead, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to butter up the metal, butter up the piece itself, get a good amount of epoxy on there, and then I'm going to put it in place. I'm going to get a clamp and clamp it all in so it's all nice and tight, and I'll let that sit overnight to cure. And I'm going to have to kind of do each piece like that, or at least all the big pieces around the hub, to get those in place, get those solid, and then I can start filling in the little pieces here and there that I need. And also if there's any cracks or gaps, I can kind of fill them in a little bit easier in that fashion. So let's get the first piece going. So I got the first piece epoxied in. You can see that I got it fitted pretty well. There is a little bit of a crack that needs to be filled, but essentially what I'm looking for is just to get all the main pieces epoxied back into place. I have this piece here, which is the next piece. It actually kind of goes right in this area, and because of the ooze out of the epoxy for the first piece, this piece didn't want to really fit in real nice and tight, so I had to go to my files and kind of back file the inner edge, so that way when I put it in place and squeeze it down in, we're missing a small chunk of plastic right here. I can at least get the crack as tight as I possibly can, as well as when I go ahead and clamp it, I got this edge as tight as I possibly can. I'll let the epoxy kind of ooze out of the crack itself, that way kind of, gluing everything into place, as well as kind of giving me a fill on the crack itself. So let me go ahead and get this piece in, and I'll do all the remaining pieces around the hub
in the same manner. So I'll get this in, and then over the course of the next day or so, because I'll let this epoxy dry completely before I move on to the next piece. So over the course of the next couple of days, I'll put the rest of the center hub pieces in place, and then we'll talk about how to take care of the spokes.
Chugging along, just epoxied this piece into place, and I'm letting the epoxy cure overnight before I move on to the next piece. So that way I can keep this clamp, or the clamps as I went around the wheel, in place so I know it's super tight. You can see it's oozing it out even through the top. I'm sure it's coming out the bottom. And that way I know I have good adhesion, I guess if you want to call it, to the hub. So I'm going to continue. This is actually in two pieces, this one over here. So it'll be a couple more days or a couple more nights of me just putting that in. And then I can start putting the spoke pieces back into place. And we'll talk about what the next steps is I'm going to take after that. So as you can see, it looks pretty bad, but it's nothing that, sandpaper and a block or a rough file won't be able to fix. I am in the process of fitting one of the last puzzle pieces back together, this one right here. And I'm doing that using the file to kind of shape the piece, as well as the utility knife to kind of clean out the edges where I may have some bleed out of the epoxy. So I'm going to clean this all up. I'm going to fit this piece in, and then ultimately we will, that would be the last piece. There is a large chunk missing right here, which kind of stinks. So I'm going to have to figure out how I'm going to appropriately fix that. I'm not going to just do a whole bit of epoxy blob in that chunk. I'm going to have to figure something out. I have an old steering wheel outside. I might chop the plastic up a little bit and make my own little piece that fits in there. And then ultimately we'll start doing the sanding process. So with that, I'm going to call this video a video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it interesting. For those who have been wondering where I've been, I've just been really busy, so I haven't really done a whole lot of tractor stuff. But the season's coming up. The Zagray tractor show is actually coming up next weekend, so I'm planning on being there. I actually even have the little mule loaded up and almost ready to go, so to speak. So hopefully the weather will hold out and we'll be there. As always, guys, thank you very much for your viewership. Thank you for your interest. Thank you for the nice comments, as always. And if you could please like and leave a comment, because over the course of time, due to my inactivity and it being 100% my fault, the algorithm is killing my channel because I haven't been active. So YouTube, in all their wisdom, have said that this guy's a bum and we're not going to put his videos towards the top of the algorithm. So if you like and leave a comment, it shows activity and it'll help me out to get this channel back on track, because we do have senior work coming up. Those are the rear rims for the senior. I also have, let's see, a whole bunch of bits and pieces of the senior sitting over here. So I am going to get back on the senior shortly, or at least coming up with some videos on that project itself. So there you have it. All right, guys, thank you very much. As always, thank you for your viewership, and we'll see you later. Have a good day.